नमस्कार, आदाब, केम छो। मैं करण मेहता आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूं लेजेंड्स ऑफ डिजाइन के एक और धमाकेदार एपिसोड में। दोस्तों, आज का हमारा जो एपिसोड है ये हमारी सारी पुरानी यादों को ताज़ा करने वाला है। बचपन, क्या दिन थे वो। हर हफ्ते दूरदर्शन पे चित्रहार देखना, समर वेकेशंस में हमारे रिश्तेदारों को खत लिखना, या फिर छुट्टियों में ताजमहल, अजंता एलोरा, गेटवे ऑफ इंडिया जैसी ऐतिहासिक जगहों पे घूमने जाना। पर क्या आपको पता है, हमारे बचपन के यादों के साथ ये जो ऐतिहासिक इमारतें जुड़ी है, इनको कौन संजो के रख रहा है? वो है हमारी आज की गेस्ट। शी वेंट ऑल अलोन टू सेव व्हाट वाज प्रीशियस फॉर आवर कंट्री। लेकिन मैं आज उनको स्टेज पे बुलाऊं उसके पहले आइए देखते हैं उनकी एक छोटी सी झलक।
For a sustainable world, our practice strives to save the past for the future. Hi, I'm Abha Narain, Principal of Abha Narain Lambah Associates.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I now welcome an architect who started the conservation wave in India, Abha Narain Lambah. Abha ma'am, first of all, thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you.
And it's an honor to have you with us. And I'm sure these kids here, they are looking forward to the conversation because you do conservation. So a lot of interesting topics and learnings for them. So ma'am, to begin with, I know that you were pretty studious. आपका बचपन कैसे था?
So I think मेरा बचपन सब बचपनों की जैसे होगा शायद. But my father was in the government services and we kept getting posted. हर कुछ सालों में हमारी ट्रांसफ़र हो जाती थी. So मेरे लिए जो मेरा एक परमानेंट घर था वो मेरे नाना का घर था कश्मीर में. और मेरे सारे बचपन की यादें कश्मीर से जुड़ी हुई हैं. And lots of picnics in the gardens of Shalimar and Nishat and a whole bunch of cousins descending on my nana's house and a huge amount of fun.
Okay. So, a girl born in Kashmir, how did the transition happen?
Actually, I grew up in virtually all parts of India. I was born in Calcutta because my father was posted there, and then moved to different parts of the country through the civil services. So for me, I never had stayed in one city for more than 5 years. And for the last almost 29 years, Mumbai has been my home, meri karma bhumi, or for me that Mumbai and Maharashtra are really where I belong.
Okay. Ma'am, कश्मीर जो हम फिल्मों में देखते हैं वैसा ही है एक्चुअली?
उससे ज़्यादा खूबसूरत है. कश्मीर बहुत खूबसूरत है.
Okay. Ma'am, how did architecture happen?
So architecture happened by default. I was very young and very impressionable. 11 साल की उम्र पे मेरे फादर की चंडीगढ़ में पोस्टिंग हुई and that was my first encounter with Le Corbusier. और जो भी आर्किटेक्चर के स्टूडेंट्स हैं, he's really been sort of the god of modernism. And for me, एक 10-11 साल की लड़की for me, Chandigarh and its architecture was really liberating क्योंकि एक साइकिल पे आप पूरा शहर घूम सकते थे और चौड़ी सड़कें थी, कम ट्रैफिक था, बहुत सुंदर पार्क्स और बिल्डिंग्स बहुत इम्प्रेसिव थी और वहाँ से मुझे इंटरेस्ट हुआ आर्किटेक्चर में एंड देन व्हेन वी मूव्ड टू दिल्ली आई वाज bowled over by the buildings of Joseph Allen Stein. और फिर मेरा बस एक ये मकसद था कि मुझे आर्किटेक्ट बनना है और कोबूजिया तो तब तक नहीं थे पर मुझे ये था कि मुझे स्टाइन के ऑफिस में काम करना है बस आई वाज होपिंग कि मतलब मेरे ग्रेजुएट होने से पहले वो रिटायर ना हो जाएं and I was really the last architect to be hired by Stein on the India Habitat Center project. So I think these two architects and their works had a tremendous impact on me as a young architecture student.
Okay. Ma'am, your journey has been, pretty inspiring, almost 25 years. Why conservation and why not mainstream architecture?
So, I studied at the School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi and when I joined SPA, उस वक्त पूरे नॉर्थ इंडिया में गिने चुने 3 या 4 आर्किटेक्चर कॉलेजेस थे. दिल्ली में केवल एक था, अब तो पता नहीं कितने हो गए हैं. मुंबई में शायद 30 आर्किटेक्चर कॉलेजेस हैं. और मुझे बस ये हमेशा एक ये लगा जैसे उस वक्त आर्किटेक्चर कॉलेज और एजुकेशन में औरतें बहुत कम थीं. सो वी वर लाइक 1 गर्ल टू 10 boys का रेशियो at SPA. और द होल आइडिया ऑफ एवरी यंग आर्किटेक्चर स्टूडेंट रीड्स फाउंटेन हेड और फिर ये लगता है कि फाउंटेन हेड में मतलब वो जो एक आइकॉनिक आर्किटेक्ट है उसको एक टॉल स्ट्रैपिंग मेल होने की क्या ज़रूरत है. वाई कांट अ वुमन fill that role? And for me it was always that why can't a woman do this? Why can't a woman establish a female-led architectural practice? और पिछले 30 साल जब से मैं आर्किटेक्ट बनी हूँ मैंने ये बहुत देखा है कि बहुत सारे अब तो आर्किटेक्ट्स बहुत सारी यंग गर्ल्स आर्किटेक्चर ज्वाइन करती हैं. शायद रेशियो ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स में देयर मोर फीमेल स्टूडेंट्स देन मेल स्टूडेंट्स इन आर्किटेक्चर. पर अनफॉर्चुनेटली जब वो करियर में घुसती हैं तो ड्रॉप आउट रेट बहुत ही ज़्यादा है और दैट रियली बॉदर्स मी. क्योंकि अगर हम इतनी मेहनत करके और जी तोड़ और कमर तोड़ मेहनत होती है आर्किटेक्चर के 5 साल में, दिन रात काम करते हैं और मतलब और कोई भी ग्रेजुएशन कोर्स में इतनी मेहनत और मजदूरी नहीं होती है जितनी आर्किटेक्चर में होती है. और वो सब काम करने के बाद वो प्रोफेशन में निकलती है, कुछ साल काम करती है और फिर शादी और बच्चे एंड दी एंड हो जाता है आर्किटेक्चर का, विच आई फाइंड इज़ समथिंग विच इज़ वेरी सैड. सो मुझे ये था कि मुझे अपनी आर्किटेक्चर प्रैक्टिस इस्टेब्लिश करनी है एंड फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम वी वर एन ऑल वुमन आर्किटेक्चर प्रैक्टिस टिल वी I mean now we have quite a few men in our firm. But मुझे हमेशा ये रहा कि किसी तरह if I can, and we get so many talented women who join our firm, but the idea is that they should not just drop off. अगर उनमें से किसी की शादी होती है तो try and be supportive as an organization कि वो शादी के बाद काम कर सकें. अगर उन्हें कभी flexible time की ज़रूरत हो उसको हम किस तरह encompass कर सकें. इनफैक्ट मेरी जो सबसे longest associate है कृति गर्ग, वो जब शी हैड अ बेबी तो हमने अपने ऑफिस में एक क्रैश किया ताकि वो अपने बच्चे के साथ since Ayansh was 3 months old, he used to come to office. My daughter has virtually, Ambika has grown up in my office. कभी stationery और architects, बच्चों के लिए तो आर्किटेक्चर ऑफिस एकदम एक खान होता है, स्टेशनरी, स्केच पेन्स. सो व्हाई कैन वुमेन इन द आर्किटेक्चरल फील्ड नॉट कंटिन्यू इन द वर्क फोर्स? मुझे ये सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज लगता है और कहीं एक ये ठान के कि हम एक प्रूव कर सकते हैं कि एक इस्टेब्लिश्ड आर्किटेक्चरल प्रैक्टिस could be a woman-led architectural practice. और एक और मुझे स्टीरियोटाइप चैलेंज करने का कहीं से शायद बिगिनिंग से ये शौक था कि हमेशा ये सोचते हैं लोग, कई दफ़े ये कहते हैं, अच्छा आप औरत हैं, आर्किटेक्ट हैं, तो आप ना घर के इंटीरियर कर लीजिए. सो मुझे ये था कि मुझे घर के इंटीरियर नहीं करना है, अदरवाइज आई जस्ट बी पुट इन दैट बॉक्स कि आप एक इंटीरियर डेकोरेटर बन के रह जाते हैं. सो इन द लास्ट 30 years ऑफ माई प्रैक्टिस हमने एक भी घर का इंटीरियर नहीं किया. हमने रेजिडेंशियल प्रोजेक्ट्स पे काम किया है, पर ऐसे रेजिडेंसेस जो कि महात्मा गांधी का घर, मणि भवन, रविंद्रनाथ टैगोर का शांति निकेतन, मोतीलाल नेहरू, जवाहरलाल नेहरू, आनंद निकेतन, स्वराज भवन, हमने ऐसे, और अब बाला साहब ठाकरे स्मारक. सो we have worked on some residential buildings, but not limited ourselves to residential interiors.
मैम, द पाथ यू चोज वॉज प्रीटी यूनिक एंड अनकॉमन, बिकॉज जब आपने शायद कॉन्जर्वेशन एज अ प्रोफेशन चुना, तब शायद कॉन्जर्वेशन के तो कुछ लॉज भी नहीं होंगे उस टाइम पे. यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट मे बी 25-30 years बैक. सो डिड यू फेस एनी चैलेंजेस?
सो कॉन्जर्वेशन जब आर्किटेक्चर करने के बाद जब मैंने मास्टर्स किया कॉन्जर्वेशन में 1995 में जब मैंने मास्टर्स का थीसिस दिया, उसी वक्त मुंबई, बॉम्बे पूरे भारतवर्ष में पहला शहर हुआ जिसने हेरिटेज रेगुलेशंस इस्टेब्लिश की. तब तक क्या था कि बस वो जो गिने चुने मॉन्यूमेंट्स जिनको आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया ने एक मॉन्यूमेंट करार करके दिया है, केवल वो प्रोटेक्टेड थे. जिसका मतलब आप राष्ट्रपति भवन से लेकर विक्टोरिया टर्मिनस को भी कोई प्रोटेक्शन नहीं थी, और पूरे मुंबई जैसे महानगर और कई इतने सारे अर्बन हेरिटेज वाज कम्प्लीटली वल्नरेबल, विच इट रिमेन्स टू क्वाइट एन एक्सटेंट इवन टुडे. सो चैलेंज ये था. चैलेंज ये भी था कि 96 में जब मैंने यहाँ पे मुंबई में अपना कंजर्वेशन का काम शुरू किया, तो फंडिंग बिल्कुल नहीं थी. देयर वाज नो फंड्स फॉर कंजर्वेशन, देयर वाज बारली एनी अवेयरनेस. लोगों को तो ये समझ भी नहीं आता था कि कंजर्वेशन है क्या. सो इन अ सेंस ये एक बहुत ही, एटलीस्ट इंडिया के लिए, एक बहुत ही नया प्रोफेशन था, और इसको इस्टेब्लिश करने में और लोगों को ये उनकी ये चेतना जागरूक करने में कि आपकी धरोहर है और इसे बचाना आपका काम है. ये आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि कोई आके आपके लिए बचाएगा, बिकॉज मोस्ट ऑफ आवर मॉन्यूमेंट्स एंड मोस्ट ऑफ आवर हिस्टोरिक बिल्डिंग्स आर रियली द मोस्ट टैंजिबल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ आवर कलेक्टिव मेमोरी, एंड देयरफॉर इट इज़ अ कलेक्टिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी. हर शहरी का ये दायित्व है कि वो अपनी धरोहर को बचाने में जितना कुछ कर सकता है करे. और अगर आप आज सस्टेनेबिलिटी के तौर से भी देखें तो पूरे विश्व भर में अब ये चर्चा है कि सस्टेनेबल आर्किटेक्चर होना चाहिए, ग्रीन बिल्डिंग होनी चाहिए, रिसाइकलिंग, यू टॉक ऑफ रिसाइकलिंग वाटर, रिसाइकलिंग एनर्जी, रिसाइकलिंग पेपर, देन व्हाई नॉट रिसाइकल बिल्डिंग्स? एंड दैट इज़ समथिंग दैट आई वाज वेरी क्लियर अबाउट even 29 years ago when I began my career in conservation, that the greenest building is one that already exists. And if we begin to adaptively reuse, conserve, recycle our historic buildings, we would be able to remain sustainable. और इंडिया जैसे देश में, भारत में 6000 साल की पुरानी हमारे पास धरोहर है, आर्किटेक्चरल लेगेसी. तो अगर हम उसको संभाल के नहीं रखेंगे तो हम एक ही तरह के यूरोप और वेस्ट को कॉपी कर के अगर हम ग्लास के डब्बे बनाते रहेंगे तो कोई क्यों आएगा इंडिया देखने? व्हाट इज़ रियली वैल्यूएबल इज़ जो हमारी आइडेंटिटी है, और उसको हम अगर उसे संजो के ना रखें तो और कौन आएगा उसे बचाने के लिए?
मैम, आई एम श्योर एज यू सेड कि उतना अवेयरनेस नहीं था उस टाइम पे. सो आपको क्या चैलेंजेस आते थे, नॉट एज अ वुमन बट इट कुड बी एनीथिंग, फंडिंग का या फिर पोजीशन होल्डर्स जो गवर्नमेंट में है उनसे कुछ फ्रिक्शन आना, बिकॉज उनको भी पता नहीं होगा कि ये भाई ये क्या मांग रही है हमसे, ऐसा कुछ होता था?
सो चैलेंजेस तो थे कि लोगों को ना समझ आती थी कि हिस्टोरिक बिल्डिंग को अलग तरीके से क्यों ट्रीट करें, कि जिस तरह के पीडब्ल्यूडी आपके रेट्स हैं, सीमेंट क्यों नहीं इस्तेमाल करेंगे, आप लाइम क्यों करेंगे, या आप एसिड वॉश क्यों नहीं कर देते बिल्डिंग को, उसको आप ढंग से कंजर्वेशन, क्योंकि इसके बारे में किसी को कोई जानकारी नहीं थी. और दूसरा ये था कि कोई स्पेशल फंड्स थे नहीं. तो कई दफ़े ये चैलेंज रहता था कि हाउ टू एक्सप्लेन कि दिस बिल्डिंग रिक्वायर्स अ स्पेशलिस्ट इंटरवेंशन. फॉर एग्जांपल जब मुंबई हाई कोर्ट का एक राइट एट द टॉप 170 फुट की हाइट पे जो एक स्टैचू ऑफ मर्सी है, विच इज़ बिल्ट आउट ऑफ कार्व्ड लाइमस्टोन, वो ओवर द लास्ट 100 and more years because of efflorescence, cryptofluorescence, वो पूरा खाया गया था पत्थर. एंड उसका जो उस समय जो पीडब्ल्यूडी इंजीनियर्स का जो रिएक्शन था वो ये था कि उसे सीमेंट लगा के उसे पोत करके ठीक कर दो. And my answer to that was कि this is a historic limestone. आपको sacrificial अगर उसकी coat देना ही है, use a like material, use lime instead of using cement. So those were initial challenges जहाँ लोगों को मालूम नहीं था कि आपको sand blast करके साफ क्यों नहीं कर सकते stone, उसको gently आप क्यों clean करेंगे, या conservation इतना समय क्यों लेता है, या so इस तरह के challenges थे. But मैं ये बहुत गर्व से कह सकती हूँ कि मुंबई में पिछले 30 साल में काम करके मुझे कभी एक दफ़े नहीं लगा कि एज अ वुमन आई एम discriminated against. I think I've had a great equation working, chahe contractor, workman, clients, government. I have held my ground as a woman, and I have felt at no point that I have been treated badly. And I think कहीं किसी तौर पे अगर हम अपने सर के ऊपर वो बोझ नहीं रखें कि I am different because I am a woman, nobody else treats you differently. And you know, in fact, that is the reason I think we have taken on a lot of public projects जहाँ पे हमें कई दफ़े सैकड़ों स्टेक होल्डर्स से काम करना पड़ता है. पर अगर आप डटे रहें, अगर आप जिसमें आपका विश्वास है और आपकी तैयारी हो, अगर आपकी तैयारी नहीं है तब nobody take you seriously. बट अगर आपके फील्ड पे कंट्रोल है, आपके का नॉलेज आप उसे अपडेट करते हैं, और आप जो भी सवाल आते हैं या जो भी चैलेंजेस किसी प्रोजेक्ट में आते हैं, आप पहले तैयारी करके साइट पे आएँ, तो देयर इज़ नथिंग दैट कैन स्टॉप यू.
Abha ma'am, you've been into conservation since many years, but we may have a lot of people who don't know what is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and what is the procedure? How does a particular site is declared as a UNESCO site? Can you please share it with our audience?
So a World Heritage Site is one that UNESCO declares as being among the finest of really the tangible legacy of humankind, and each country tends to select some and shortlist those and present them to UNESCO, saying that this deserves UNESCO World Heritage status. It has outstanding universal value. India has 42 World Heritage Sites, but the process of getting a site inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site is a very difficult, arduous, and a very detailed process, because for each site the country has to submit a very detailed dossier with documentation, with arguments to justify why it has outstanding universal value. So we prepared this for Shanti Niketan as well as for Mumbai's Victorian and Art Deco ensembles. And it really takes a whole team working for years to put together the entire history, archival information, the documentation of that entire ensemble, and then more importantly to be able to prove to UNESCO and international bodies why it is so important, what is the uniqueness of that site. So it really takes a lot of collective effort. Yes, well. But then it is for the country, because then your country and your nation get the tag of a World Heritage Site.
Okay. We are in a day and age where mainstream construction is at its peak. You are handling projects which are probably 100 years old or maybe 200 years old. Is selecting the material or finding the material of those sites, is it a difficult task in these days?
Of course, because each site has its very peculiar and its very specific materiality. And in conservation, you have to be aware that whatever material is used, there is an authenticity of material, as well as an entire process of archival research, documentation, to establish the fact that you are not meddling with history. When you restore something, you have the responsibility that you are restoring it as authentically as possible. And each site is different. So if we were working on the Chandramauleshwar project, the temple in Hampi, we were working with materials such as granite, which was local. When I was working in Ladakh on a 600-year-old Buddhist site, which is built of mud, our conservation process utilized local muds, and even within that there were different clays. So there is markhala, there is a 3 or 4 different clays that are used at different layers of the project. Local grasses like yaxus, which grows only in a particular area. So you collect grasses, you look at woods and timbers that are specific to that construction. So a lot of information needs to first be collated before you embark on a conservation project, and very often you have to rely on the local community, because there is something like an indigenous craft knowledge, and there is a wisdom that comes through generations. And for each conservation architect working in a site like that, you have to engage with the local community, because you really get to learn so much from their knowledge systems, and that should go into the conservation process.
Okay. Have you ever felt that about any specific project which probably would have been a very challenging time or a very tough project for you to execute?
So many projects have posed different challenges. So I think physically, some of the most challenging projects was the Chambalakhang in Basgo in Ladakh. That project I worked on for 3 years, because it would go to minus 40 degrees Celsius in the winter. So our site would open when there was complete snow everywhere, and we would start working in April end, and we would work till October. And after that, the site had to be closed because it was at an altitude of 11,000 feet. There was no running water, there was no, what you would normally consider, no toilets, no flushes, so very basic amenities. Projects such as, on the other hand, in Hampi, we were working on a project, a 15th century temple which was in the middle of a river. So the only way we could reach the temple was using those basket boats. There was no other way. There was no motorboats, no bridge, nothing to reach our site. And even to get to that site, it would take time. We've worked on a project in the interior of Jharkhand, in a small village called Maluti, which had no electricity, no cell phone connectivity. So a lot of times our projects have taken us to the remotest villages of India, and yet one feels so enriched by that, because you get to really see the absolute, authentic architecture and cultural heritage of those areas. My team is currently at Shalimar Garden in Kashmir. It's a project funded by the JSW Foundation, and it's freezing cold in December, January, and the team is working right through that.
Great. It's a real test of human patience in these days. Ma'am, one project which is close to my heart, because I was also from a performing arts background, Opera House. You have restored Opera House. So how was your experience? I've seen the images. It's pretty much, beautifully restored.
Opera House is truly a remarkable project for my entire team. The building was built as an opera house. It was the only surviving opera house in India, built in 1916. And then, of course, it turned into a performance theatre. So you had some of the greatest living legends of India perform there. You had plays by Prithviraj Kapoor. You had, some of the greatest classical musicians perform at Opera House. And then it became a cinema hall. So for many years, it ran as a cinema hall. And in the 80s, when VCRs came into vogue, and when people stopped going to cinema halls, which were not air conditioned, and then it shut down. So for 25 years, the building remained like a ghost theatre. It was shut down.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so badly, there had been so many structural issues. There was leaking roofs. There was a lot of corrosion of the concrete structure, that by the time we were appointed by the owners, Maharaja Saab and Maharani Kumud of Gondal, the building had been declared unsafe. And it took us, a a few years just to ensure that the structural integrity of the building was restored. After that came the next challenge of to be able to restore it to an opera house, to a performance theatre. We had to both look at what the original interior design was, what the original colors were, and for that we did a lot of intensive archival research. We found photographs of how it was 100 years ago when it was opened, and even then we just couldn't understand why when we saw the interior it looked like an Art Deco interior when the building had been built before Art Deco was even had even arrived on the scene. So it kept niggling that how could the interior not match with the exterior, because the exterior was this neo-Baroque revivalist building. And finally we found, we went through old films and a lot of old film footage, and we found a film with Rajesh Khanna and Shashi Kapoor, and there was this climax scene shot at Opera House, and in that we were able to see the old balconies which were in the Baroque style that had at some point been demolished and the interior had been changed to an Art Deco, and we realized that was towards the end of 60s and early 70s. And from that we started rebuilding the building, going back to the oldest layer of the building, and when it reopened 100 years later in 2016, it was just welcomed by the whole city with open arms, and so many people have come to me and said, oh, I remember as a child going there to watch, buy a ticket for 25 paisa. And in the last 7 and 8 years that it's been restored, it's become such a vital cultural space in the city. There have been theatres, opera, musical performances, and it's just wonderful to see a building come back to life.
Okay.
Absolutely.
आभा मैम, आपने राजस्थान में भी काफ़ी इंटरेस्टिंग साइट्स पे काम किया है. Any memories about that?
Rajasthan is one of the states with the most expansive heritage and such amazing variety of buildings. We've worked in on Amir Fort, the master plan for it, which is a World Heritage Site. We worked in a small area called Ver, which is a tiny little kasbah. वहाँ पे हमने acres and acres of historic gardens, एक सफ़ेद महल और बगीची को रिस्टोर किया और वहाँ के किले को रिस्टोर किया. We worked in Bharatpur, where we converted, we restored the museum and upgraded the design of the museum at Bharatpur. We worked in the Jaisalmer area with Guldhara, एंड पूरा जो शेखावती का जो एक पूरा रीजन है जिसमें बहुत ही खूबसूरत हवेलियाँ हैं जो मारवाड़ियों की हवेलियाँ हैं. सो वी वर्कड ऑन द सीकर डिस्ट्रिक्ट टू क्रिएट अ कंजर्वेशन प्लान फॉर द इंटायर डिस्ट्रिक्ट ऑफ सीकर. सो राजस्थान में और जयपुर में स्पेसिफिकली वी वर्कड ऑन, we were brought in initially as consultants for the underground metro जो वॉल सिटी के बीचों बीच जा रही थी. और जब हम वो उसके आर्काइवल हम इंफॉर्मेशन देख रहे थे, हमें एक फ़ोटोग्राफ मिली जहाँ बड़ी चौपड़ और छोटी चौपड़, जहाँ की देखने में सिर्फ एक राउंड अबाउट था और सड़क थी. There was an old photograph from the 19th century that showed something like a step well. So हमने कहा गवर्नमेंट को कि कुछ गड़बड़ है कि अगर ये आज के दिन में एक सड़क है और एक गोलचक्कर है और एक पुरानी फोटोग्राफ में कुछ लगता है तो क्या हमें अवशेष मिलेंगे. सो इंस्टेड ऑफ अ नॉर्मल ट्रांसपोर्टेशन प्रोजेक्ट वी एक्चुअली commenced with a full archaeological dig, और हमने पूरी एक archaeological scientifiक excavation करके we rediscovered 2 कुंड्स राइट इन, मतलब बिल्कुल राउंड अबाउट के बीचों बीच हमें कुंड मिले जिनको हमने आर्कियोलॉजिकली डिस्कवर किया. मार्बल के गौमुख मिले बिकॉज दैट वाज द प्लेस जहाँ से पानी आता था. And then after the metro design had to be completely changed, we reset the kunds and actually created a system where when you get off the metro, you come underground into the kund area, and we created a museum of archaeology under the road at a metro station, which is the only one of its kind in India. Lovely. And perhaps the world.
मैम आई एम श्योर आपकी सारी साइट्स आपको कुछ ना कुछ नया एक्सपीरियंस देती होगी।
बिल्कुल, और बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिलता है क्योंकि कई दफ़े आपको ये एहसास ही नहीं होता कि ऐसा भी कुछ मिलेगा, एंड समटाइम्स दीज थिंग्स जस्ट इमर्ज एंड इट्स अ ग्रेट सरप्राइज एंड अ रेवलेशन।
यू नो conservation से आप इतनी closely attached है, and of course it's your profession. Are there any misconceptions about conservation in India?
Oh, there are a lot of misconceptions. People used to ask me, are you a conversation architect? I would say, no, I'm a conservation architect. लोगों को समझ नहीं आता था ये है क्या। फिर कुछ लोग सोचते हैं कि वो आर्किटेक्ट नहीं होते, वो उनको सिर्फ ये करना आता है, जबकि एक कॉन्जर्वेशन आर्किटेक्ट बनने के लिए पहले आपको 5 साल की आर्किटेक्चरल डिग्री के बाद पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन करनी पड़ती है। एंड इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाइक अगर आपके कान में दर्द है और तो आप गायनोकोलॉजिस्ट के पास नहीं जाएंगे, ENT स्पेशलिस्ट के पास जाएंगे। सो कंजर्वेशन आर्किटेक्चर इज ऑल्सो दैट you are a specialist, so you have the basic degree of being an architect, so you can design buildings, but you also have additional information and knowledge to be able to practice in the field of conserving buildings and urbanscapes as well.
Talking about your projects, I think there's one more project that I would like to highlight, and is the Bikaner House in Delhi.
So Bikaner House was one of the princely estates in Delhi when Lutyens was planning New Delhi, and it was sited right at the India Gate at the Circle. And from this, the kind of stately home of the Bikaner Maharaja, post-independence, it became a part of Rajasthan government's offices. And by the time, we started on the project, it had come down to being a bus adda, because from there people would take a bus from Delhi to go to Rajasthan. And it had become a completely sarkari building. There were pan stains, there were tube lights, there were Godrej cupboards. There was just nothing that looked like how it had once been. So for that project, we got around to working, and within 9 months we converted it back from a bus adda to a cultural center, and it has become one of Delhi's most popular cultural centers. There have been book releases, there are restaurants there, there are exhibitions, and it's become a cauldron of people coming for art, culture, and it's completely, revived that building. So many times, a historic building can just come back to life and be adaptively reused for something that gives so much value to the community around it.
And ma'am, I think आपने बॉम्बे में भी काफ़ी सारी हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग्स को रिस्टोर किया है, BMC बिल्डिंग्स।
जी, so मुंबई में हमने एशियाटिक लाइब्रेरी, डेविड ससून लाइब्रेरी, जो कि दोनों बहुत ही सबसे पुरानी लाइब्रेरीज हैं मुंबई की। वी वर्कड ऑन synagogues like the Knesset Eliyahoo Synagogue. We worked on a lot of educational buildings like the JJ School of Art, the Convocation Hall. We worked on cultural buildings like the Opera House. We have also worked on a lot of office buildings. The BMC head office, which is one of the largest single conservation projects that we took up and in the country. The Bombay High Court, the City Civil Sessions Court, and of course now we're working on the Gateway of India. We also worked on Mani Bhavan, Gandhi Sangrahalaya, and the Prince of Wales Museum, which is Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya. So Mumbai has been, a city that we have worked in for 25 years, and that is why I think it's as a city, it's unique, because whether it's railway stations like Baikala Station and Bandra Station, which we have restored, to even Crawford Market, which is one of the oldest public wholesale markets, it has such a wonderful collection of Victorian buildings that are being used to this day. Therefore, the average person, the citizen, feels a very great connect with heritage, क्योंकि उनकी वो रोज़मर्रा की ज़िंदगी में वो heritage से उनका वास्ता पड़ता है, चाहे वो एक ट्रेन पकड़ के बांद्रा से बाइकला जाएं, या वो अपने दफ्तर जाएं, स्कूल हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग्स हैं, कॉलेजेस हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग्स हैं। अगर कोई किसी की शादी होती है तो जहाँ रजिस्ट्रार का दफ्तर है वो एक हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग में है, किसी का कोर्ट केस होता है तो सब कोर्ट्स heritage hai. So I think for cities such as this, which are historic cities, the people of that city feel a greater connect with their heritage because it is something that they are using and dealing with every day.
Okay. Any favorite sites for you? Maybe some interesting memories while you were doing the restoration?
Well, one of my favorite sites has been the Qila Mubarak in Patiala, which is one of the most beautiful Sikh palaces and forts in Punjab. And it was built at the time when the Mughal Empire was declining and the Sikh empires were on the rise. So a lot of craftsmen from different parts of Rajasthan and the Delhi court had migrated to Punjab for this. It has some of the most beautiful buildings, and we worked on structurally consolidating them for the government of Punjab, and we are currently working on with Park Hotels to turn one of those palaces into a heritage hotel. So it's wonderful to see a building that was in a state of ruin come back to life and regain its dignity through conservation.
Okay. Ma'am, we have got our next generation architects sitting in front of us. Can we take a few questions from them too?
Please.
Who's going first? Yes, please.
Hello ma'am, my name is Richa Chhabra. What principles do you think are essential to achieve such a meaningful connection in your projects, especially when you are in conservation?
So for conservation, it's very important that you understand the intent with which a building was built or the building was designed. For example, if I'm looking at a building such as the Convocation Hall of the Mumbai University, and I know that it was designed by the great architect Gilbert Scott, I need to understand his architectural sensibilities, the materials he used, the kind of drawings. Am I able to get access to the historic archival drawings? So I'm able to do the conservation correctly. It should not be that I place my visual judgment higher than the actual design of the architect who designed that building. So spirit of place is equally important, where the mood that a building reflects should not change dramatically because you have decided that you like, pink, and then you go around painting historic stone. So material authenticity, the integrity of the design that was originally envisaged, it's the responsibility of the conservation architect to ensure that their personal likes and tastes don't overwhelm the design of the original building. And that balance is important.
Next question. Yes, please.
So, hello ma'am, myself Nidhi Kataria. So ma'am, in what ways do you engage with local communities and take their inputs while designing a projects with conservative architectural approach?
So local communities are really the custodians, and in many of my projects are my primary clients. So when I was working on the 15th century Buddhist temple in Ladakh, my client was the local community. So all the villagers of Basgo village were my clients, which meant that I had to ask them what they wanted. I had to report back to them. I had to discuss with them what the whole conservation methodology would be, and then they would tell me whether they agreed with it or not. For example, and especially working on urban projects, when you are dealing with, let's say, one individual building, you're only dealing with the owner of that building as your client. But in public projects, like one of my earliest project was urban streetscape and for Dadabhai Naoroji Road, which meant that every shopkeeper, whether it was a large bank or a small luggage shop, was my client, and I had to work with them to design the whole signage, to design the street furniture, and also to implement it. So instead of one client, I had 200 clients. We were working on urban illumination projects in Jaipur, and where the entire street of Badi Chop, of Johri Bazaar and Chauda Rasta, and which are all very intense shopping streets. each shopkeeper was my client. So I had to talk to them and say, okay, can we, light up your building like this and have enough chais and samosas with everybody down the line? Because for an urban project, you have to bring on board the constituency, which is the stakeholders. And at the end of the day, you're doing it for them. And at the end of the day, they are your greatest asset because they can tell you things about what the building was like or what were the original materials used. For Mumbai, I mean, when we've worked on projects like Bandra railway station, my client is everybody who takes a train and either alights at the railway station or gets off from it. And while we are working on the restoration, so many times passers-by and train commuters would just tap me on the shoulder and say, Changla dista. And, they really have a view and they would be excited about, if you've done something right. So it's very gratifying as well.
Next, please.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Sanika Rajguru. My question is, how do we draw a line between conservation and adaptive reuse? Because at this moment, this is a need of an hour to have multifunctional spaces.
Absolutely. I think adaptive reuse is a part of the many tools in the toolbox of conservation. So conservation is an overarching umbrella, and within that you have preservation, you have anastylosis, conservation, restoration, you have adaptive reuse. And adaptive reuse is really the need of the hour because you need to recycle buildings and ensure that they're relevant in contemporary times. And we did a project many years ago. In 2009, there was an old fire station that was redundant in the Viceregal Lodge in Shimla. And we converted that into a little bookshop and cafe. And it became a magnet for the local people in Shimla to come and have a cup of coffee and, to take in the whole atmosphere of Viceregal Lodge. Bikaner House was another project of adaptive reuse where we converted a bus adda into a cultural center. So with each such intervention, what you actually do is extend the life and the relevance of a historic building. So it doesn't remain, a dead monument that you pass by. It remains in active use. And the more we are able to do it, it is better for the environment, it is better for the community, and of course, extends the life of a building.
Thank you.
Who's going next?
Hi, I'm myself Anurag. So my question is how do you approach the challenging designing spaces that cater by the contemporary needs by respecting the conservative values?
So space design and today's generation requires a certain level of lighting or certain ambient temperature. You need controls that are HVAC, MEP and many other things which need to be completely cutting edge in 21st century. And very often when you are putting that and integrating it with a building that could be 19th century, that's a very important aspect, that how do I bring in the technology of the 21st century without spatially destroying the look of the space. And you come across that challenge in many projects that are, not just like monuments where you peep in and you leave, but are buildings in active use. We faced that with the High Court and the Bombay Municipal Corporation, because in both these buildings, they were buildings that were 19th century, but they needed air conditioning, they needed Wi-Fi, they needed fiber optics for all the data. And to be able to do that without it looking odd or without having to compromise on a 22 feet high structural space of a ceiling by putting in a false ceiling and killing the spatial ambience of that. So at that point, an architect really has to delve deep into wire management, into technical issues, so that you don't upgrade a building at the cost of the spatial integrity. And I think we've managed to do it quite well in buildings like both Opera House, where the acoustics had to be, fabulous level of opera acoustics, but we could not bring in any false ceilings. We could not bring in, like the kind of elements that you would normally bring in, like acoustic paneling in a vaulted roof, or even in the BMC head office, where we brought in VRV air conditioning, but we didn't want to have false ceilings. So we actually devised a way that the large halls that were 22 feet high ceilings, we used jet nozzles and air conditioning thrown through the side rooms, where by using those little holes in the wall that were originally used for the pankhas. In the 19th century, they had the cloth pankhas, and there would be a rope, and there would be a chaprasi sitting outside the room, and his job would be to pull the rope. So we used that opening to throw in pressurized air-conditioned air, so we don't see air conditioners or ducts when we are sitting inside the main conference halls. So it's things like this. You have to really get into little details to make sure that the spatial quality of the buildings are not compromised.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Hello ma'am, myself Ansari Afzal. So ma'am, while using new technology, how you are using new technology while keeping old craftsmanship alive in your projects?
So we use new technology very often as a diagnostic tool. जब आप बीमार होते हैं तो डॉक्टर आपसे एक्सरे करवाने को कहते हैं या अल्ट्रासाउंड कराने को कहते हैं, तो उसके बाद वो डायग्नोसिस निकालते हैं कि आपके लिवर में प्रॉब्लम है या कहीं और. इसी तरह कई दफ़े आपको कंजर्वेशन में भी डायग्नोस्टिक टूल यूज़ करने होते हैं. सो वी यूज़ लाइडार, वी यूज़ अल्ट्रासोनिक पल्स वेलोसिटी, वीव यूज्ड सर्टन नॉन डिस्ट्रक्टिव टेस्ट्स to be able to understand the building better and its condition. We use photogrammetry in some cases, like the Gateway of India. We use photogrammetry to be able to very accurately record all the issues with each and every stone before we, arrive at an answer or a solution for how to address that. So technology is used very often in understanding and diagnosing the problem. But then when you actually do the conservation work, you also try to keep the craft alive. So we've had master craftsmen work on stone carving in projects where we need to do Dutchman repair or with stone. We've worked with, craftsmen who've worked well with lime mortars and araish to bring that beautiful buffed, almost mirror-like quality to lime plasters. We've worked with the master craftsmen in using gold leaf gilding for even Victorian buildings, wherever we've had to restore them. Stained glass conservation, trained glaziers who have looked at every little inch of stained glass. We've worked with the master craftsmen for restoration of, in Lal Bagh Palace, there was a whole team of craftsmen working on restoring all the historic carpets and even for the fabric, the historic fabric that was used by the Holkar dynasty. We got each and every design of the weaving completely replicated so that it would match in terms of the color, the texture, the weave. So by doing that, we hope to keep the craft alive and as close to the original as possible.
Do we have any more questions?
Hi ma'am, I'm Smriti Kacheri. So my question to you is that how do you replicate the finishes and the construction methods of the old buildings that were to be restored, and what were the studies and surveys that you have conducted in the past projects?
So to study the construction methods is probably one of the first things that one embarks on to be able to do a good job of conservation. Because unless you understand the material, unless you begin to understand how it was put together, you can't fix that building. And that's a very important aspect of the pre-implementation planning. And after you've understood that, then you begin to intervene in that space. And I think with each and every project, you learn a few lessons and you learn a few things more. Sometimes you learn, the construction techniques just by the visual analysis, by documenting it. Sometimes you look at buildings of that period and see whether, you try and establish where that material comes from, who were the craftsmen, or where it was transported from. And very often, local communities also tend to have some traditional wisdom that is embedded in their generations. And a lot of times we've learned so much from the local craftsmen who've, enriched our knowledge of those materials. So I would always suggest talk to the local craftsmen, because they can give you so much more information than you would get in books and, a lot of journals.
We can have one last question. Yeah, yes, please, you there.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Lavanya Guram. So my question was, what is the scope of future of conservation in terms of profession as well as projects? And what is the scope of art restoration in architectural conservation?
So conservation as a profession, if you think of a country which has 6,000 years of built heritage and barely a handful of qualified architects who know how to deal with that heritage, I think conservation is something that is of great value for the future within the architectural community. And also within that, art conservation becomes an aspect of that, because there are many buildings, and monuments, whether it's Ajanta Ellora and you're talking about murals, or whether you have painted, wall surfaces on so many historic palaces. Art conservation is a very important aspect of conservation, and for that, architectural knowledge is not mandatory, but one can acquire it, as an art professional, then going into conservation. And there are, while as a conservation architect, you need to have architecture as your graduation and then a master's level course. For an art conservator, you can do a course in art conservation that is available at National Museum and other institutions who then you delve into that in greater detail.
Abha ma'am, thank you so much for the interaction. I'm sure they must have learned a lot of things through this conversation.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Any interesting suggestions for our next generation who want to come into conservation? It could be about anything. It could be about taking conservation as a mainstream profession. It could be about the pay scales that conservation offers.
So I think architecture gives you the tools for designing buildings, but what conservation does is give you the tools for designing buildings in context. Because when you go to these historic buildings or historic towns, हम देखते हैं कि इतने खूबसूरत towns में, चाहे आप हैदराबाद देख लें या दिल्ली, शाहजहानाबाद देख लें या कोई भी शहर में, और बहुत सारी खूबसूरत बिल्डिंग्स पुरानी होती हैं और उसके बीच में एक ग्लास और एल्यूमिनियम क्लैड एक बिल्डिंग है which has no context, and it's completely built in isolation. So conservation teaches you the skills of being able to create new build, but in a more contextual format. So you are not building things that are unsuitable to the area or have a disconnect with the urban context. So it maybe gives you the tools to design with a greater sensitivity towards the urban context, and it also gives you the tools to be able to extend the life of a heritage building, a monument, or an interior. It gives you the skill sets for being able to restore a historic interior to the level of perfection of being able to understand architectural styles, interior styles, restoration of fabric, furniture, fittings, stained glass, and to be able to bring it all together. So the architect becomes like a conductor of an orchestra. You have to work with structural engineers, you have to work with lighting consultants, with MEP consultants, you have to work with landscape, with urban design, and to be able to put that together, so the final product is has that credibility, and that's important.
And does a conservation need a very strong passion towards the subject?
ऑफ कोर्स, क्योंकि कंजर्वेशन में अगर आपको एक कोई भी चीज़ जो कि इतनी इम्पोर्टेंट है कि वो 500 साल से है, तो आपको उतना ही आपका दायित्व बढ़ जाता है कि आप उसको ख़राब ना करें. अगर आपके हाथ में कोई एक बहुत ही प्रेशियस कांच का ऑब्जेक्ट थमा देता है, यू हैव टू बी दैट केयरफुल दैट यू डोंट शैटर इट अलोंग द वे. एंड अ कंजर्वेशन आर्किटेक्ट्स रोल इज़ एग्जैक्टली दैट यू आर द कस्टोडियन of a very important architectural heritage, and you have to be as careful about it so that you handle it with care and pass it on to the next generation.
Abha ma'am, we also got an opportunity to meet a few close people from your life. Let's have a look what they have to say about you.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Suri. I'm an actor and a producer. Today I'm speaking as a brother, as an admirer of Abha Narain Lambah. Abha was top-notch in academics. She was just bright. She was just very bright. She was always very articulate as a young teenage girl. But no one really knew that, she is going to pick up conservation as her specialization. Because back then it was extremely difficult to be a conservation architect, because just the concept of conservation was kind of alien. I can just imagine how tough it must have been to convince the agencies, people, in the government that time, just to spend money on conservation and our heritage. But she did it. She's a very here and now person. She lives life. She's high on energy. If she makes a plan, she calls me Sanju. She says, Sanju, we're going there, we're doing this, we're doing that. Are you on or not? I'll be like, oh, hang on, So it's very tough to match her energy. And whether it's work or, things she does for fun, travel, explore. We pretty much came to then Bombay, now Mumbai, pretty much at the same time. And I remember she was in Breach Candy, and she lived as a paying guest. And but even that small room as a paying guest, there was some lovely gypsum blocks where she put her, used as a partition or something. And then I was getting my first TV. My film was releasing. I didn't have a TV, so I bought a TV. First TV, as in as an actor. My film was releasing, so I said I have a TV, but I don't have a table. So she gave me those gypsum blocks to keep the TV on. One thing is very common, whether it's work or personal life. She does things with love. She would not do something what she's not interested in. If she's not interested in meeting someone, she will not meet. And the people who she loves, who she's fond of, she would maintain those relationships, friends, family, and she'll always be very ready to make programs, plans. Like I said earlier, whether it's travel related or even meeting locally. She's extremely honest to her relationships, and she expects that in return. And that's what shows in her work as well. Otherwise, because she's so with it and in the present, and sometimes she's a scatterbrain also in her personal life, absent-minded, and she'll forget things, and because she's so much there that kabhi gaadi ki chabi or bhul gayi, kabhi kuch bhul gayi, वगैरह वगैरह. Those little things which we all laugh about. But she's a wholesome woman. I would say she's done a lot for other women, and she's in an organization also. You'll see that there is that bonding. They live and they work like a family. And I think she's a good boss. And that, I think, credit goes to her father, because he was a great boss. And she sort of learned that from her father, that how to be a good boss and or a team member. She's very multifaceted, a woman of many talents. I used to love her handwriting. I think all architects have wonderful handwriting. She sings very well, if you didn't know. She sings very well. She acts very well. And maybe not many know of it. Abha has done stage back in the days in college. And she's a fantastic actor herself. On camera, I would like to say that as a brother, I would always tell her that, Abha, you could have been the next Smita Patil. you could have been a great actor. So in the end, Abha, I'd like to wish you all the very best for your present times and the days to come. And we always say, let us grow old together. And many more achievements and happiness and great health. And don't worry, me and my family, and we all are there for you. Lots of love. Love you.
Hi, my name is Krishna Iyer. I'm one of the directors for Abha Narain Lambah Associates. I've been working with Abha for the past 18 years now, and I first joined her in the year 2005. She sketches beautifully. I've not seen any architect who sketches so wonderfully, and she puts her point forward in every design what she wants. Abha is a very beautiful singer. I am not sure how I'm not sure how the public has seen her, but we as a close knit have heard her singing all Mohammad Rafi songs, Kishore Kumar ke songs, and she aces at it. She is a foodie. She loves to travel and she loves to eat during travel, and she's a complete non-vegetarian. She's crazy over Punjabi food. She's crazy over Kashmiri food. You name any food, she will eat it. So she's Being with Abha for 18 years has not only been a challenging, but also we have shared a lot of lovely memories in terms of how we have seen the firm progress, not only with conservation, but also dealing with new built and interiors as well. And I hope that this trend continues and we become the top firm in all the aspects. I would like to thank Abha for giving me this opportunity for 18 years to look after these projects, and I wish her all the best and all the luck and all the confidence in taking on more projects with full confidence, and we can take over the world with this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shifali Modi, and I've been working with Abha for last 3 years.
Hi, my name is Rucha Kamath, and I'm the Senior Conservation Architect here at Abha Narain Lambah Associates. I've been with Abha ma'am for almost just over 3 years.
She is extremely energetic about her work. She's passionate. She brings that, and she tries to bring that in us also, and at the same time, she is extremely optimistic. Actually a very good human being, because she supports. She is always there when we are ill, when we are feeling low.
During COVID, there was one female who was from Delhi. I think she stayed with Abha at her house
for 2 months.
For 6 months, throughout the first lockdown, and I think she has done cooking and recipes and whatnot.
Yeah, they had a blast.
They had a blast during the second lockdown. I think that was when India was suffering a lot, and one really generous thing that Abha did was so she bought an oxygen generator for herself, and we were all at home at that point, and then she just sent a message on the office WhatsApp group that, guys, I have this with me, the O2 generator, and if anybody of you or your family member needs, it's there.
It's always available.
Just let me know. And luckily we didn't need it, so that's good, but it was very, very generous on her part as an employer to make something like that available for her family and for her employees without having any second doubt.
Abha ma'am's sense of humor is little different with each and every person.
If you catch it, you catch it. Otherwise, you're just wondering what is going on.
When we are in a trip or any outing, she is equal to us. She makes sure that we are equal to her, and she makes us feel very comfortable.
When we, or at least when I was studying architecture conservation, I remember always following up on Abha ma'am through the newspaper articles. So my dad would always call me like, see, your Abha's article is there. And I'd be like, okay, I need to read every word in that article, because she was always our inspiration, our role model, because she's the one who took conservation and made it into a mainstream career, which she should be applauded for. Nobody else has done that. She's expanded
the era, you know, that of whole conservation and the air around it to a very different level. And for architects, young architects, budding architects, conservation is always the last thing that we choose.
Yes.
Because it is slow, but Abha has made sure that is changing in everyone's mind every day. So I think we owe her.
Yeah, a big one on.
Abha ma'am actually is a fighter for the world. She is strong, very strong-headed personality. But we people who work with her, we know for sure that she is extremely emotional and sensitive at heart, and she is someone we can look up to any time of the day. I wish Abha ma'am succeeds even more and flies and touches the sky. Sky is not a limit, but you know, she should go international. I think the world needs her, but along with us, of course. Take us along with you, Abha ma'am. We really need you. So yeah, but all the best, Abha ma'am, for your future.
अच्छा, एक चीज इसमें शायद हमने प्ले नहीं करी, आप अच्छा डांस भी करती है.
करती थी 30 साल पहले. I think that was a very, that's ancient history.
Okay. This segment was powered by Tostem Windows, framing the beauty of living. मैम, हम अपने शो के इस एपिसोड के आखिरी पड़ाव में आ चुके हैं. Before we end this episode, I just have one or two more questions for you. Has success changed Abha Narain Lambah as a person?
Not at all. I think in my entire team, I'm the most over-enthusiastic cutlet. If a project comes, I'm more excited about rushing off in the middle of, you know, a jungle or somewhere. And the day, actually, I feel the day I stop getting, you know, excited about the work I do, I'll hang up my boots. So I don't think that's changed me at all.
Thank you so much, Abha ma'am. Before we end this episode, we would like to have a small photo opportunity with you. Can I have the portraits, please?
Oh, you want me to?
Yes. Ma'am, can we have a small photo with you? Sure. This moment was powered by Demore by Qtone, luxury tiles and windows for your home. हम लोगों का पिक्चर तो हो गया, आप लोगों को आभा मैम के साथ फोटो लेना है कि नहीं? आ जाओ, कम. दोस्तों, ये थे आभा नारायण लांबा. आभा मैम से मिलके मुझे एक बात मेरे ध्यान में आती है. आर्किटेक्ट वो नहीं जो सिर्फ हमारा भविष्य बनाता है, बल्कि आर्किटेक्ट वो भी है जो हमारा इतिहास बचाता है. वी थैंक आवर टाइटल स्पॉन्सर टॉस्टेम विंडोज, आवर पावर्ड बाय स्पॉन्सर डीमोर बाय क्यूटोन एंड आवर एसोसिएट स्पॉन्सर वॉक्स बिल्डिंग मटेरियल प्रोडक्ट्स. जल्दी मिलेंगे एक नए एपिसोड के साथ. तब तक गुड नाइट, शब्बा खैर, शुभ रात्रि. हाय, आई हैव एन अनाउंसमेंट. दोस्तों, आज के इस सोशल मीडिया के दौर में आइए हम आपको लेके चलते हैं उस जमाने में जहां पे कम्युनिकेशन होता था लेटर्स से. वॉक्स प्रेजेंट्स लेटर टू लेजेंड्स. आप अपने फेवरेट लेजेंड्स को इस एड्रेस पर खत लिखिए एंड वी विल इंश्योर कि आपके लेटर्स हम आपके फेवरेट लेजेंड्स तक पहुंचा देंगे.